with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, monimaluwanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so honored that you would join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Please ask them to subscribe to the show. And please join them in subscribing to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever you find your podcast. We are kicking off 2024 with our guest, Safina. He is here to celebrate Alfie and Me. We want to invite all the authors and aspiring authors who are listening to the podcast to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Please be sure to click on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page to discover how we can help you celebrate your book with the entire world. Now, you know, if you are an author, especially an independent or self-published author, you probably had no idea that when you were writing your book and getting it published, you had no idea that once that book was published, that you became the CEO of a small business, your book business. Yeah, it is. It's a business now. And you had no idea that there are literally thousands of books published every single... You thought I was going to say year. No, there are thousands of books published every single month. It is so hard for a book to stand out in that crowd, especially an independent or sub-published book. But we would love to help you do that. If you visit readingwithyourkids.com and click on that Authors Click Here button, you will discover how you can be a guest here on the podcast. Being a guest gives you the chance to tell the world all about your book. It's fun, it's easy, and it doesn't cost you a thing. You can also learn about our Certified Great Read program. This is a program that has helped so many authors. You can also discover our monthly promotion program. We're really excited. We've helped so many authors to date, and we would love to help you. Please go to readingwithyourkids.com, click on that Authors Click Here button at the top of the page, and discover how we can help you celebrate your book with the world. Join us right now from beautiful Long Island in New York. Our guest is here today to celebrate his new book. It's been named a 2023 Scientific American Best Staff Read. Please welcome to the show the author of Alfie and Me, What Owls Know, What Humans Believe, Safina. Hey, Carl, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Delighted to have you on. Now, as I understand it, Alfie is a real-life screech owl that you rescued from the wild.
Well, yes, somebody else rescued Alfie, I guess you could say, and then called a wildlife rehabber who was a friend of mine, and I worked with that rehabber for a little bit, and then the rehabber had to go overseas right when we thought Alfie would be releasable, but there was a delay. I think it was caused by the fact that she was nearly dead when she was found as a 10-day-old nestling, and her flight feathers were not coming in properly. So I kept her to make sure that they would and make sure that they would molt and be replaced properly. And at that time, the COVID epidemic hit. That gave me a lot of time for watching her, observing her after her release, and she became a free-flying owl. And that's really why I had all the detail and all of the interaction that gave me a story to write a book about.
So something positive is coming out of the pandemic.
The pandemic had some silver linings to it. I wouldn't want to repeat the silver linings with another pandemic, but there were some lessons to be learned.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about a screech owl. I've been down in Central America, and I've experienced howler monkeys, and that is a name that is very well that's a great name for them because they howl and they make all sorts of noise. I'm guessing screech owls do the same.
No, they don't.
No, they.
I've often wondered why they're called screech owls. The only time they screech, and it's a very light little low volume screech, and that the only time they do that is when they're really scared, when they're being mobbed by jays and robins, for instance, or if a person grabs one, they will utter a soft, screechy protest. Other than that, they have a trill that's a very, very lovely little sound, and a whinny that sounds like there's a tiny horse up in a tree somewhere.
I'd love to hear that sometime. I imagine it would be pretty confusing for me being in the woods and hearing a whinny thinking there was a horse above me.
Unless you knew about screech owls and why they don't screech.
So tell me, how did a guy living on a Long Island become the go-to guy to rehab a screech owl?
Well, I have worked with birds and other wildlife for my entire life, starting from the time I was a very little boy, and I raised pigeons. Then I got into falconry. Then I studied wild birds, mostly the seabirds called terns. And I did a lot of wildlife rehabilitation in my younger years. So I was very well primed. And that, in fact, is why the wildlife rehabber who was called about this little baby owl that we named Alfie, why she texted me with a picture saying, "Do you know what kind of bird this is?" And why she sought me out to work with her on helping to get Alfie on the road to recovery.
You have an interesting title for the book, Alfie and Me, What Owls Know and What Humans Believe. Before we find out what owls know and what we believe, what was the inspiration for that title?
The inspiration for the title was something that a guy named Ben Killam said to me, which is in the book. Ben Killam lives in New Hampshire, and every time somebody finds or creates an orphaned black bear cub, it goes to him. And I was there visiting him. He raises these bears and he rewilds them. He's an incredibly insightful person. He knows a lot about animal behavior, and he just has an incredible innate sensitivity for the nuances of the behavior of these bears and their responses when they're very little, and how he needs to basically re-enculturate them for rewilding. At any rate, what he said was that language has taken humans from being knowers to being believers, that other animals are knowers. They learn things and then they know those things that they've learned. But humans hear things that people have told them and they believe those things. And sometimes those things are correct and accurate and real, and sometimes they're wildly inaccurate, but we may believe them anyway. And I thought that was an incredibly insightful statement. So we often say that humans are the only logical animals, but actually humans are the only illogical animals. All other animals are completely empirical. They believe what they see and what they've experienced. We believe things that we don't see and that we don't experience because people have told us.
You know, that is a really fascinating and powerful sentence, and I think it's something I want to spend a little bit more time on. We talk here a lot on the podcast about helping our kids become media literate and understanding what it is they are consuming, understanding that the people who create these things that they're consuming, they have an intention when they're creating them. And sometimes those intentions aren't always pure. And anytime we have a journalist on, whether it's print, television, or other media, we always ask them, how can we help our kids become more media literate and be able to discern what information they should trust and what information they should dig a little bit deeper into. I think probably a really great place to start those conversations is with that sentence that owls and bears and other animals, they know, they learn, they experience things, as opposed to us. We're just hearing things, and we don't have the time to experience all these things and to check these things out ourselves.
Right. But remember that the reason that owls and bears and everything else believe what they know because they've experienced it is because they have experienced the evidence themselves. Mm-hmm. And evidence is, I think, the basics of critical reading and of really believing things that are true rather than believing things that are not true. So, just for instance, science is an evidence-based endeavor. Mm-hmm. You may have a hypothesis and the evidence says, no, that hypothesis doesn't hold up in the face of experimentation and data. So instead of believing your own hypothesis, then you say, well, the hypothesis was wrong. I don't believe what I thought was the case because I tested it and it's not the case. That's a very powerful thing, and science did not arrive on the human scene until pretty late in the game, only, maybe 200 years ago or something like that. When you see things, when you read things, when people tell you things, the first way to begin to check into whether the claim is true is, what is the evidence for this claim? Mm-hmm. And science, the evidence has to be repeatable. It has to be able to be something that anyone who does an experiment a certain way, let's say, they will get the same result. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care what you believed previously. It's a way of finding out, and it's a way of finding out that is based on evidence. So that's what I tell the students I teach, because one of the things I teach in my course that I do at the university is critical reading, which is basically, how to tell if somebody is trying to mislead you or they're trying to bring you down a path where the evidence really does not hold up. They don't show you the evidence, or the evidence that they show you is one-sided. Mm-hmm. So evidence is a way to discern the difference between what you should know and what you should or should not believe.
Yeah. What about, because and kids are inundated, not only kids, but all of us are inundated with so much information. When I first started learning about media literacy many years ago, my kids were in elementary school. They're adults now, and at that time, it was estimated that kids are exposed to 3,000 media messages every day. I'm sure that's probably doubled or tripled since I took that one course. We don't have time to kind of investigate every single thing that we're hearing. What advice would you give to a parent to share with their kids as to, what they should do before they can actually dig in and see what this evidence is and find out whether it is they should believe it or not, when everybody around them is screaming, oh, you got to believe this way, you got to believe that way, or the world is going to end if you don't believe. And we're not just talking about climate, but it's almost everything. Like, yeah, you have to do something today. Yeah.
I mean, I would say don't believe anything until you've checked into it. But, just say, well, that's an idea. I will keep that idea in mind, and I won't believe it or act on it until I've actually checked into it and seen what I think about that idea. For instance, oddly enough, I've been an environmentalist and a conservationist for my whole working life. I remember the first time someone said to me that humans were causing the climate to change. And I said, no, that can't be true. I literally said that out loud to him. That was my verbal response. But what I thought was, wow, I need to check into that. And I checked into it, and I realized that he wasn't just talking, that there was a lot of evidence showing this, that there was scientific logic showing it, and that it was, in fact, true. It was a terrible truth. It was something I did not want to believe. Mm-hmm. You know, people say, oh, climate change is a hoax, as though we would like to believe that the climate is changing. Nobody I know who knows that the climate is changing because of people would like that to be true. Mm-hmm. It's true despite the fact that we don't like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the difference between a fact and an opinion. A fact can be true whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that idea of encouraging our kids to sit back and say, all right, well, that's interesting, and I'm going to check into that a little bit more before I take action.
Yeah, right. You know, before you just start repeating it all over the place or reposting it or taking some sort of action or incorporating it into your belief system or your life, just check into things first.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot at stake if you don't.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people. I mean, we live in a crazy environment of being absolutely bombarded with information and opinion. And, you know, you can kind of go out of your mind, and you can go way off the rails if you just decide that you're going to believe things that appeal to your belief or sensitivities without actually seeing whether there's a good reason for it.
Yeah. So what specifically does Alfie and other owls know that we don't know, that we just kind of believe?
Well, I think the main thing is that Alfie knows that everything that she needs is here in the world with her. And Alfie knows that there are things that she needs that if she gets enough of, it's enough. And those are two things that people in our culture tend not to believe. Mm-hmm. We tend not to believe that everything we need is here in the world with us, that the world is actually the sacred place. And most of us don't know the meaning of the most important word in our language, which is enough. When we have enough.
Wow. You are right. You're right. There's so much that is happening today because so many people are afraid that there's not enough. And so I have to hoard it, or I have to prevent you from getting it. And,
or I have to have as much as you have.
Right.
However much that might be.
Yeah. This story of Alfie and telling the story of Alfie and then sharing this truth with the readers and us with our kids. I'm just imagining what a powerful series of conversations we can have with our kids as we, Alfie and Me is, I think, a perfect book to co-read with our kids and then to have discussions at the dinner table on the way to soccer or ballet or school or on the way to someplace where we can experience nature together.
Well, that's a beautiful thought. I'd love to think of people reading together and talking about the ideas in the book. It's not just a story about this incredibly sweet little owl that we raised who became a rewilded, free-flying owl and got a wild mate and raised her own family. That's a really beautiful story that happened. It's also about the question of, why are we usually so disconnected from nature? Is this something that is just a limitation of the human mind, or are we taught to be disconnected? What were other people taught in other cultures throughout thousands of years in different parts of the world? So it's an exploration of that as well.
Really, One of the things I love about this podcast is we get to talk about books that bring up these conversations, bring up these questions that don't have that simple yes or no answer. It's just going to lead to more and more and more conversations, which will help families grow closer together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the things that we love sharing with our audiences is, the idea that we can protect the planet together without freaking out and thinking that, the world is going to end tomorrow. What would you suggest for parents? What's the first step that a family can do together to support screech owls or to start to make a difference in the world that is really meaningful?
Yeah, I don't advocate teaching kids, especially young kids, that the world is in tremendous existential trouble, even though it is. What I advocate is to teach kids to love the world and to see how beautiful and fascinating and diverse the living world is, and how wonderful it is, and how much fun it can be to be involved with it and be enmeshed in it. That's what I think is what we should do with young kids, is just have a great time with the endless fascination and beauty of nature.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have a place in nature that you go to? You don't have to tell us a specific location of it, but a type of nature that you love to go to that really kind of recharges your soul.
Yes, for me, it's being on the ocean, out of sight of land, as the sun is coming up, in a place where there are a lot of seabirds and a lot of whales and a lot of dolphins, where all the life has gathered. And there are places like that. There are places like that actually off of New England. I know you're doing this broadcast from Boston, and off of New England are some of the best places to see and experience this kind of thing, this community of gigantic wildlife that lives in the ocean. These huge fish, these whales, these dolphins. There's that. That's my favorite. But we also just love watching the birds at our bird feeder outside the kitchen window. That can be one of the most beautiful parts of our personal lives that we get to see every day, and how it reflects the changing season with the different birds coming and different plumage that they get at different time of the year. So you can look very far, or you can just stay really close. And the thing about this book is it all happened basically in my backyard. Yeah. My other books, I went to different continents. I went to very far-flung places. But, exotic is just where you happen to be focusing your attention.
Right. Yeah, we are blessed. My home, it's in the city of Boston. However, it's we're as far away from downtown as you can be and still be within the city limits. In fact, the city line is right on the other side of my fence, and we border a wildlife sanctuary. And the sanctuary just happens to be it's kind of like the I-95 for a lot of migrating birds. And so the spring and fall every year, there's 1 or 2 days during the year where our backyard is just filled with literally hundreds of or if not thousands of birds kind of chilling out and resting on their way from one place or another.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I live on Long Island, and certainly the ocean beaches are often the leading line of a migration, where birds coming south suddenly hit the ocean. They don't really want to go out. Most of them don't really want to go out over open water like that. And so they just turn down the coast and they get more and more concentrated.
Yeah. Hey, if there's a parent out there who has a kid who really loves nature and may want to make a career out of helping nature. What advice would you give that parent, whether they're inspiring a young boy or young girl?
Well, obviously, it depends a bit on, whether they're 6 years old or 17 years old. But getting as much of these experiences as one can, outdoors, camping, walking around, birding, maybe fishing, things like that, and getting involved with people who are older and who are doing it. Mm-hmm. Various kinds of clubs, wildlife rescue centers, wildlife sanctuaries that have some places have, environmental ed or wildlife programs. And then, of course, when it gets time to think about maybe going to college, doing a major in something that has to do with environment or conservation, something along those lines.
Yeah. Well, we should also let people know where they can go to find out more about Alfie and Me, what owls know, what humans believe, and find out more about you and your other books.
Okay, sure. Well, all of my books are available every place anyone sells books. So, they're in bookstores or they can be ordered by any bookstore. I always advocate trying to help support local bookstores. If the books are not there, you mention my name, look at my titles, see what you want to order. They can order them. They can be ordered online. You can see all of my titles and a lot of other things that I've written with links online at carlsafina.org. That's CarlSafina.org. And you can get started that way, learning a little bit about me. And I have a small not-for-profit group called the Safina Center. That's another place you can go to see some other work that I'm involved in, safinacenter.org.
Wonderful. We've had a really fascinating time speaking to the author of Alfie and Me, What Owls Know, What Humans Believe. Our guest has been Carl Safina. Hey, Carl, thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been a great honor to be with you and a lot of fun.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. We are so grateful that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. We'd love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on Twitter. If you are on LinkedIn, please connect with Jed Doherty. We also have a Reading with Your Kids page on LinkedIn. We would love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Authors, click on the Authors Click Here button to find out how you can be a guest here on the show and find out how we can help you celebrate your book with the world. And also, parents, please be sure to visit readingwithyourkids.com to download our free online magazine. Hey, we want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our amazing guest. I also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Chris Doherty, Ann O'Leary, Soji Franklin. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.